Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, June 27th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. On this episode, we'll dig into some mid-season buy highs. As promised earlier in the week, we're going to have some more fun with that new FanGraphs Player Rater tool you can use right off their page. Just go to the Fantasy tab, hit that link, and you can have fun all afternoon with that. We're going to dig into some players. We're going to buy high. We're going to talk about choosing a direction, how to not be the Angels in your fantasy league, because as we discussed on Tuesday, you don't really want to be the Anaheim Angels right now. It's not a franchise that you want to model if you are playing fantasy baseball. We'll dig into some weekend waiver preview players as well. Some interesting names added to the pool, kind of mushing together Project Prospect and the waiver preview this week. How's it going for you on this Thursday?
It's going great. Weekend approaches. It's
Weekend
summer.
Approaches again, yeah.
We're deep in the throwing program with my eldest. So today is a go to the Little League park and do the whole thing. The big practice that we do. The
big workout. Very nice.
Yeah, one of the fun things is in coaching, they have this idea that you want to vary the implement. And so when we do a round of hitting practice, we start with this really weird looking thing. It's still pretty baseball-y because you kind of want to keep it baseball-y. You don't want to be jumping around playing basketball or whatever. Like it's supposed to be baseball-y, but it's really strange. It's a ball that's on a string, and you attach the string like to the fence behind them. And then I pull the two strings apart and it sends the ball down the string. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine that?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I like it is that it flattens their swing out a little bit. If you have a really uppercut swing, you'll hit the string instead of the ball. Or you'll hit the ball in this way where it goes up and down instead of straight back to me. So it kind of flattens out their swing. And a lot of kids end up having uppercut swings because when the coaches pitch to them, they pitch, they're 6 feet tall. And they pitch these crazy, like downward trajectory, like almost curveballs, and so a lot of Little League kids end up with these uppercut swings. And so we start with that, then we do a little bit with like this little rebar bat that's like this thin, and he has to hit little tiny balls that I throw at him, and then he has to hit with the wood bat, the like major league level wood bat that's super heavy, and then he gets to hit live batting practice that I have to pitch from regulation 50 feet away. I have to pitch as hard as I can to be as good as 12-year-olds. and he takes live batting practice off me. So it's all an exhausting but fun kind of thing because you're trying to trick the brain into kind of reevaluating hitting at every different stop.
I just think it's great that you have to use a day that's not a run day for you to do this workout.
I do, because it's really tiring. We couldn't do it yesterday because I ran 8 miles.
yeah, you can't do both on the same day. That's the downside of being on the wrong side of 40, right? That's the cliff that I am rapidly approaching, and I am not excited about it. Let's talk about some mid-season buy highs. They're looking at the FanGraphs Player Rater. Every time I look at this thing, Gunnar Henderson moves up another spot. He's now third among all players for the entire season, approaching $50 in value, which, look, we talked about Gunnar Henderson a few weeks ago as someone that maybe we somehow underrated even as a highly regarded prospect, because I don't know if anybody thought future first rounder in fantasy was what we were looking at, but that's what he'd be if you were doing a second chance draft in the next week or so. If you're doing a 4th of July second half draft, something like that, I think Gunnar's going in the first round, even of a 12-team league. And I think that's where he's headed for 2025 drafts as well.
Yeah, and I have no nits to pick. I think he's the complete player. He's even reduced his strikeouts. That's really the only thing that you could have said about last year. And it's not just been like, oh, year over year. Basically, he struck out a little bit too much when he started playing in the league, and then ever since then it's been on a downward trajectory, strikeout rate. So Gunnar is a complete player. How many stolen bases will he have next year? maybe he only gives you like 12 or 15 next year. Stolen bases age terribly, so even if he steals 20 this year, is no lock for 20 next year. But if you basically back of the envelope him next year, the projections are going to say something like, 280, 35 homers and 15 stolen bases.
Yeah, that's always good. And there's always the possibility he will continue running more because he's still really young. I mean, he'll turn 23 in 2 days.
Yeah, there is the thing where like sometimes your power hitter, you're like, don't hurt yourself out there.
Right. So that could keep him from being a, 40-40 guy or something. But there's a lot of ways he can still be really good and kind of hold. So the reason I bring up Gunnar, though, is because if you're in a situation where somebody thinks, hey, I can cash out right now, I'm happy to trade for Gunnar Henderson as a first round caliber player right now. I think he just fits into the conversation that way. The harder thing to do is to look at the top earning pitcher.
I don't think he's not available anywhere.
I don't think you're getting him. I think whoever has him liked him when they drafted him in the late second round, early third round, and they're just happy that he's been even better than they could have hoped. It's a harder proposition doing this on the pitcher side, where Ranger Suárez, as the midway point of the season approaches, is the top earning pitcher so far. Just over $35. I'm using the 12 team settings right now, just for anybody who's like, oh, I'm using 15. It's different. That's why I'm using the 12 team settings. Mm-hmm. He's doing this from outside the top 300 during draft season. And when you look at the other names that have really popped so far this season on the pitching side, it's been kind of a group of aces that you expected to be there, interspersed with guys that have taken massive leaps. Ranger from the pick 300 range to number 1, right? Seth Lugo cranking out a ton of value, being the 4th ranked starting pitcher right now. If you listen to the show, talked about Seth Lugo a lot. Hopefully you reap the benefits of that. Chris Sale having a bounce back isn't as shocking as Lugo and Suárez being up there, but there were plenty of people that were ready to give up on Chris Sale because it had been such a meandering road full of injuries in recent years. Tanner Houck kind of taking that leap, much like Ranger. He's the 6th rated pitcher so far on the season. You got Wheeler and Gray and Burns in there, and then Garrett Crochet, who I've admitted I kind of laughed at the White Sox when they said they were going to start him because I didn't think health-wise it was even an option, and it's gone incredibly well. So you got a bunch of names on here that are surprising, but Ranger still being here as the calendar nearly flips to July, that is still surprising to me. Even as somebody who looked at him 6 weeks ago and said, okay, he's probably better than I thought. I didn't think he would sustain this level for another 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to the fact that, he's got multiple fastballs. He really does throw 3 fastballs, and that's been something that can mess with pitching models and definitely messes with hitters. To each handedness, he can basically throw 2 different fastballs, and he even throws a sinker sometimes to opposite-handed guys. So that's 3 different fastballs that you kind of have to honor in the same range. And the curve, and I think the change has kind of taken a step forward this year and is a better pitch. I have to say that I don't buy this one as much. You do have your guys in any given season that don't have great stuff, that do put together good seasons. I don't know. I guess Andrew Abbott is not a good example, but Eduardo Rodriguez had a 3.3 ERA last year. Dane Dunning was in the same sort of stuff range, command forward, kind of multiple fastball guy. He had a 3.55 ERA last year. I'm looking at Kyle Hendricks had a 3.74 last year. Michael Wacha, multiple fastballs, great changeup, location over stuff. He had a 3.22 ERA last year. Braxton Garrett's 3.62, Merrill Kelly's 3.29, Wade Miley's 3.14. This is where I kind of place him, maybe on the upper end of that. But that's where I think he lives for me. I may be wrong.
So looking back at the Raider from 2023, Zach Eflin was in the top 5. The top 5 were Garrett Cole, Spencer Strider, Blake Snell, Zach Eflin, and Kyle Bradish. And Eflin, I think, is probably the most surprising name of that bunch. That to me is more of the ceiling, right? Where it's close to a strikeout per inning for Ranger Suárez. He's probably not going up another level beyond that. That's fine. You can be a very good starting pitcher, especially if you're a high volume starting pitcher at a strikeout per inning. Last year for Eflin, it was a 3.50 ERA at a 102 whip. So, fine in ERA, excellent in whip, and 16 wins. And I think wins are one of the things when you're looking at the player rater, you really have to be mindful of what's happening in that column. And it's more than that for Ranger, but the 10 wins are the thing that kind of jump him up from maybe being the 7th or 8th best fantasy starting pitcher to the number 1 spot.
That may not change much in the next few years,
Yeah, I mean, they're well set up. Yeah, well set up right now. So I do think he could slide a little bit over the course of the second half, still be really good, still be someone who's on a bunch of teams that probably cash this year because of where he was taken and just how good he has been. But then I think, if I'm looking for air quotes undervalued pitchers because they aren't winning as many games, like Cole Reagans is 27th among pitchers in the player rater with 120 Ks in 98 innings, a 3.03 ERA, a 115 whip. And I think when you start looking at Reagans versus some of the names ahead of him, even Ranger Suárez all the way at the top, I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I would take Reagans over Suárez. I'd take Reagans over Tanner Houck. I would take Reagans over Sonny Gray even in many cases. Maybe that's more of where the would you rather line is. But the big surprises in that top 10 are all guys you'd still probably put behind Cole Reagans, even at the midway point of the season if you're re-racking for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's a good point. Freddie Peralta's 5 wins are affecting his player rater, where he is on the player rater. Fromber's win total probably has a little bit to do with that. But Logan Gilbert has been so great that even though he only has 5 wins, he's still a $24 player. So, it's wins is definitely a thing that you can circle and buy based on the peripherals and hope that the team improves around him, basically.
Yeah, and the flip side of that is Gavin Stone, who's now in the top 20 in the player rater because he's got 9 wins, only got 70 strikeouts in 89 innings. We talked about the possibility of him maybe adding some Ks over the course of the year. Still a decent swinging strike rate, at least one that's higher than the strikeout rate that Gavin Stone has put together to this point in the season. But it's a 2.73 ERA. That's a huge part of it. The ratios are good. A 112 whip still very good as well. Gavin Stone's tough, though. Is Gavin Stone more like a Ranger Suárez in terms of his ceiling? Or is there another level beyond that, given that we haven't seen as much of Gavin Stone in the big leagues yet?
The vertical movement on Gavin Stone's fastball is improving as he stays in the major leagues. I think, sometimes, who was it that was talking about this? Mark Kotze was talking about, bringing Lawrence Butler up to the major leagues. And one of the things he said was, we do player development at all stages, but one of the stages where we can do the most of the player is the big leagues. And so sometimes you find that you get to the big leagues and your best coaches are there. So Stone isn't going to necessarily finish off and get more vertical break in the minor leagues if Mark Pryor has, some ideas for him in the major leagues that'll make it happen. So I see Stone as maybe possibly taking the next leap. I also wanted to say, I just sorted by wins in this thing. And it is just sort of amazing. You have basically every player with more than 7 wins is worth basically $10. The only person who doesn't have, who has more than 7 wins or 7 wins or more that isn't worth $10 is Logan Allen, who has a 5.72 ERA and a 1.55 whip. But it is worth pointing out, how does he have 8 wins with that ERA and that whip? And then you were saying Cole Reagans can't win? Seth Lugo has 10 wins.
No, yeah, that's the thing. They're just so noisy. We know ridiculous. That. It's not new, but I just think when you're trying to find in-season values and opportunities to leverage in trade, it's one of those areas where the in-season value has some sogginess, I'll call it, where you can kind of fudge things a little bit to your liking, and it's an area that you have to pay attention to, even though we know the category is flawed. It's interesting too. The thing that the player rater really highlights is the run environment. So if you look at sort it the way Eno did, sort by wins, you say, oh, Grayson Rodriguez, Carlos Rodon, okay, 9 wins, sub 4 ERAs, low 1-2 whips, strikeout per inning stuff. Okay, good. They're both below $10, which is a reflection, I think, of those ratios not being as good as we're accustomed to them being, right? If you go back maybe 3 years, go back to like 2021, those are good or very good ratios. In this run environment, those are closer to average ratios for the slice of starting pitchers that are frequently used in fantasy. League-wide, I realize they're better than league average, but when you narrow down the pool to the guys that are actually being used in a lot of 10 and 12 team leagues, it doesn't play up quite as much as we are accustomed to.
Yeah, it is. The run environment kind of constantly going up and down is itself something that can be leveraged in fantasy sports, and just the knowledge of the fact that batting average is the lowest thing ever. My eldest in his first fantasy league basically punted batting average in a head-to-head league because he was like, none of these guys have good batting averages. I'm like, yep. And so that's something that you can look at when you're buying a player is just, a batting average that somebody might think is bad ends up being okay, if they under further reflection. And, similar you were just talking about with ERA and whip. I just have wins reverse sorted, and I'm like looking for some players that I think will win more teams, more games going forward that I think might be a sort of buy lowish, or they're not buy lowish in that their ERAs are bad. And so they wouldn't show up on my buy low list the normal way I do it, but just sorting by wins reverse. Reese Olson only has 2 wins. Taj Bradley only has 2 wins. And like, just when you're doing that and you're looking and you're trading with somebody, they might, on some level, just look at the player rater on some level, because there's always like that analysis where you can like look at, that you can analyze the trade in Yahoo or whatever, Cutter Crawford having 3 wins sticks out for me. So, those are 3 names that have had some up and down to their careers, and maybe the other owner just looks at, the other fantasy manager just looks at the player rater and says, yeah, I can trade this guy away.
Yeah, could definitely be that way. So we'll hone into some more specifics, right? So I want to take the broad view and explain like what's kind of good and bad, or how we should really use the tool more broadly. But who specifically stands out to you? Who are you looking at and saying that player's more valuable than I expected, and I'm still going after them? We'll start on the hitter side. Which hitters do you think are most intriguing as mid-season buy highs?
Well, I have a trio of guys that when I look under the hood, I don't see signs of really extraneous good luck. Now, I'm going to say these names, and maybe you'll think there's no way I can get them. But that's the whole thing about buy high is you never really know until you try, and you are trying to buy someone that is doing well. So that's what we're doing here. I've got Josh Naylor, Jackson Merrill, and Jordan Westberg as guys that are in the top 40, I believe, in the player rater. And I don't really see any signs that what they're doing is unsustainable. In fact, with Josh Naylor, there's a really low batting average on balls in play that seems really out of place. And we're heading into the warmer part of the season in Cleveland. So, I think if you can get him, there's no reason not to. And if the person who sells him thinks he's just a 240 hitter, I think you might see as much as 280, 285 going forward. And so that's the nicest thing about like a buy high is if there's elements of buy low in it, Mm-hmm. With Jackson Merrill, I think it's hard to know exactly what his true talent power is this far into his career. And we've seen a little bit of a mini explosion recently in power. Maybe that keeps him from being, acquirable, but given, 111.6 max EV, given, the great contact rate and the power and speed combo, I would buy Jackson Merrill saying, if all I get going forward is 280, 1010, that's fine. Is there a chance there's a little bit more power there? I think so. And then Jordan Westberg, he's the only one that I think has like a little bit of a negative, in that his strikeout rate is starting to rise. And we talked a little bit about he has a really unique approach in that he's pretty aggressive. He chases a decent amount, and his swinging strike rate is a little bit high. And that aggressiveness has served him to not strike out in the past. The strikeout rate is sort of starting to meet the swinging strike rate. If you look at the rolling graph of strikeouts for Jordan Westberg, but it is such a nice sort of balanced line of power and speed that I think I'm still going to buy anyway. He's the one that has a little bit of a shade of possibly positive luck that may go the other direction going forward.
Yeah, I could see a little bit of that. I had Westberg on my list too, though. I really like what he's done all season. It's been, fortunately, one of my multiple teams' hits so far. I hope it holds up to the second half. The underlying power numbers are still good, right? He's getting more hard contact than last year, even. And I thought he was off to a nice start at 44.5%. He's up over 48% right now, lifting the ball consistently, double-digit barrel rate to go along with it. If the K rate comes up, I do think the walk rate may come up a little bit too. Maybe it's just being a little more selective. And,
he used to walk a lot more in the minors. Yeah.
Yeah. So that part of his game might help. That could create a few more opportunities to run if the power dips a little bit. So he has so many ways to be good. And of course, the Orioles lineup is still solid. Still lots of ways they're going to put runs on the board. So you're getting good run production, good RBI totals on top of all of that. So I think he's just a really nice all-around player at this point, and it still maybe has one more level in terms of ceiling, but even if he doesn't, the pace he's on right now would make him a pretty firm, like 4th or 5th rounder, I think, in 15-team leagues if we were redrafting today, and that's probably where he's headed again for next season as well, barring some kind of massive collapse. What about Jarren Duran? I think he's at 2750 now, 12th hitter. I feel like I see more quality plays from him in center field because it's a highlight. You're not watching games start to finish. They're not usually showing you the blunders, the misplays.
I've watched some games start to finish and definitely seen some blunders, but he has the physical tools to pull it off. So maybe on some level it's just a little bit of coaching, a little bit of experience, and just seeing the ball more in the outfield. Maybe he's just going to become a passable center fielder by just working at his flaws, basically.
Yeah, I think that's what it seems like is happening. Again, the Red Sox not high on my viewing priority list, but what I've seen has been better than what we've seen in the past. So becoming more important on that side, playing a ton, and he's healthy, right? We were worried about, I think it was the toe coming into the season. That doesn't seem to be a problem. He's played 81 games so far. He's running, he's getting to the power, he's striking out a little bit less, really doing everything you want. And I think he's proving himself to be a really good source of batting average. Jarren Duran's projections are all more in like 260 range. I think the bat X is the highest at 271, but he's at 287 this year, 295 last year. So I think you're talking about someone who might be plus in a category where it's hard to find someone who's plus. He's at least passable in the home run department. He's good in stolen bases. And then there's the runs and RBIs you're getting on top of that. I think there's a chance that Jarren Duran still isn't being treated quite like an early round pick via trade. So maybe you're doing just fine, even though you're paying a lot more than you would have paid to get him 5 or 6 weeks ago.
And what I like about his line, Jarren Duran's line, just like Josh Naylor, is that there is a little whiff of upside here still. And that comes from the fact that he's hit a ball 113.1 miles an hour, but has only turned that into an 8% barrel rate. So the raw is there. And what I'm looking at is a 29% pull rate that's down from even where he started in the big leagues. Now, the higher pull rates did not turn into good batting lines for him. So maybe this is the best approach for him. I'm not trying to be his hitting coach. I'm just saying maybe just like with the outfield defense component, maybe as he matures, he knows when to take that shot and pull that ball and pull it in the air. And maybe he can add that to what's already a compelling existing baseline. So basically what I'm saying is Duran has a little bit of upside beyond what he's doing right now, which is what if he does what he's doing right now and adds power to it?
Yeah. And that would be really good if that happens. So it's nice to have that extra way to possibly get a little bit better. I had a few questions that I'm not sure I'm going after them, but I'm trying to decide if they make sense because of various characteristics about these players. But Brice Turang, it's happening right before my eyes, and I didn't see it coming. I just didn't. I didn't see another level from him. I actually thought at the time when the Brewers added Joey Ortiz, I thought Brice Turang was in danger of losing playing time against lefties. He drops in the order in those spots, which is fine. You're still playing. And sometimes it's only 2 plate appearances anyway before they're into the bullpen, and you might see a couple righties anyway. But he's getting to his power a little more. He's striking out less. And, of course, the speed's fantastic. I mean, Brice Turang is on pace for 50 steals this year as things are going right now. He has to hold something close to this massive jump in OBP for that to happen. But are we buying this? Is Brice Turang the latest addition to the Andres Jimenez, Bryson Stott, Ha-Seong Kim bucket of players that gets to more power than expected, but also runs wild and maybe even is very good in batting average too, which also props up that value?
Yeah, I think Kim, I'm glad you said his name. Kim kind of leaps off the page. I just sorted qualified batters by swing strike rate. Luis Arias is, of course, number 1. Yandy Diaz is number 2. I don't really think he's a comp for either of those guys. Diaz hits the ball harder, and Arias's K rate is a third of Turang. So he's still a unicorn. Then you get Mookie Betts, who is just his own man. Isaiah Kiner Falafel. I always want to say falafels.
You're just hungry. That's all. It's almost lunchtime for you.
I think the risk is he's Falefa, actually.
Yeah, Isaiah Kiner Falefa. Better than Falef ass, as we saw on the scoreboard. Like, this poor guy is just living his life. And
there's a risk he's him. He does have more speed than Falefa. So if you just gave Falefa 20 extra stolen bases right now, how much more value would he be? You know, it's a decent floor if that's who he is. If he's kind of Falefa with speed, that's great. If he's Kim, you don't look too hard at Kim this year. Think about Kim over a 2 or 3 years stint. I think you'd be very happy if Turang was like Kim on an average year. I'm not sure the power is there. So I'm going with Kiner Falefa with speed.
Okay. You're going
Brendan Donovan with speed.
That's still a good player.
Mm-hmm. But maybe not. It's funny, you don't like Nico Horner.
I do not like Nico Horner.
Nico Horner has about the same swing strike rate as him.
Yeah. I think with Nico, does Nico Horner have less power than Brice Turang, though?
Nico Horner has hit the ball 110 miles an hour this year, but has a 1% barrel rate. Turang has only hit the ball 106.7, but has a 3% barrel rate. So there's a bit of a game versus raw situation here, but I personally would say that I think that Horner has a little more power than Turang.
Yeah, they're pretty similar profiles, actually. So that's the built-in warning.
A little bit of water on your, a little bit of a dampening of your flame that's burning for Turang.
Well, see, here's the thing, though.
The main thing, flame.
the main thing I didn't like about Nico Horner during draft season was just the price. And Brice Turang was a bargain, but if Brice Turang is going into the Nico Horner 2024 ADP range, then maybe we have a bit of a problem there if we don't see more raw power coming in the future. It doesn't look like it's there. That's why I was so skeptical. Even though he's a great defender, I thought Turang would be good in the 75% of the plate appearances he was getting. I was just worried about what was going to happen with the other 25% of the playing time.
Really quickly, there is a little bit of a lesson here. I just sorted last year's stolen bases, and I'm looking at below average power with stolen bases. Nico Horner was 5th, and this is qualified, so I'm sure. Let me make it, what do you think? 400? I'll make it 400.
Yeah.
All right. So 400 stolen bases. Oh, yeah, that helps actually. So Esteury Ruiz is second in stolen bases, the .091 ISO pass, right? Let's make a rule. One 50 ISO. Okay. Nico Horner, 100 ISO pass. Ha-Seong Kim, 138 ISO pass.
I got him nowhere.
Willie Castro, 154 ISO. I say just pass. It's so close. Bryson Stott, 138 ISO pass, and that's our first pass that would have hurt us a little bit this year. Right?
Yeah, I think
but
so.
But how much? I for having missed the landmines that we have so far, I would take losing Stott, right?
Right. It's been $9 in a 12-team league.
Yeah. So we
almost break even, like a slight loss.
Oh yeah, because you paid for him too. So there was a cost for Stott.
Mm-hmm.
So we so far have missed like 4 landmines and lost for it one guy who was cost. Andres Jimenez, 147 ISO pass. Is he worth what he cost?
$6 so far. No,
I don't think he's worth what he's cost. Tommy Edmond, 150 ISO pass. Whit Merrifield, 110 ISO pass. Brice Turang, 082 ISO, was 24th in the big leagues in stolen bases last year. He might be the guy who costs us the most so far, and I think the rule still stands. Tyro Estrada, 145 ISO pass. Michael Garcia.
Yeah, so where are we at on Garcia? He's at $15 in terms of what he's returned so far. So it's been good where you got him. It's been fine.
He's probably been the guy who's cost us the most with this rule.
Yeah, him and Turang's been more valuable. I guess Turang was the best profit of so far, anyway,
but
at least.
Turang and Garcia are a little bit different than the other ones in that they cost the least. Yeah. So if you make a rule that's like basically they have to have league average power for me to buy them for stolen bases, unless I can get them after, like, do you have an ADP or something?
Garcia, he was fringe top 200 and he got hot and moved up at the end of draft season. Let's just say outside the top 200 generally.
Then you're
or at least the first 10 rounds.
There's a rule. They have to have league average power for me to buy their speed, unless we're like past pick 175.
And I think it's because
not pick 175. That's only hitters. No, yeah, you were overall. Okay,
overall.
So past pick 170. So if we are past 10 to 15 rounds, depending on the depth of your league, then you can start to be like, all right, this may not work out, but I'm going to take my shot at finding the next Turang or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's just making sure that you're not paying a premium for a somewhat discoverable skill set. We've talked about it in other contexts before. You wouldn't take a low average masher in the 4th or 5th or 6th round, generally speaking, if they didn't offer up something else. Like, they would need to be elite in terms of power and run production to offset the low average.
Yeah, like I don't end up with Kyle Schwarber much either,
Right, even though the numbers would say, you can actually do okay with Schwarber here. It's like, well, then I think I can find something pretty close later on. We will at some point talk about how there were some late power bats that people really liked from a barrel rate perspective, power perspective, that have just not performed. I think Nelson Velasquez has joined Matt Wallner in the 2024 Disappointments Club. It was inexpensive. It didn't ruin you. But if that was your, I'm going to get my power later plan, it hasn't really come together the way we've hoped. The pitching side of this is interesting too. I think Ronaldo Lopez comes up in a lot of these conversations because he's popping on the player radar. We don't know what's going to happen in the second half in terms of fatigue, but he's made it through full seasons as a starter before because the team is good, because he looks pretty good. I'm inclined to just lean into it and actually go get Ronaldo Lopez in leagues where I need pitching, because I do think you have a more willing trade partner in those cases than you do with a lot of the hitters that have exceeded expectations, because those hitters have become really important. But I think when you can, on both sides of a trade, see the potential downside, I think that's when there's still an opportunity to actually get something done. And Lopez, maybe he's a $10 or $12 pitcher the rest of the way, but I don't think you're paying a lot more than that in terms of what you're giving up. Maybe you're sending a hitter in a 1-for-1 swap. Are you giving up a hitter that's, I don't know, like could you give him Tyler O'Neill for Ronaldo Lopez? Would that deal get done right now if that fit the needs of both sides?
Yeah. The thing that bugs me a little bit is just when we think about innings limits and we think about guys who are going past where they've been in the past, a lot of the times we just worry about shutdowns or will they be removed from the rotation, go to the bullpen. We worry about sort of the 1-0 problem, which is the on-off problem. Either they're a starter or they're not. There is a secondary problem, which is they could just fatigue in their current role.
Yeah.
So they could leave him as a starting pitcher and you could start to just see the velo go down. We have not seen that yet. In fact, right now, in his two of his last 3 games have had the best velo of the season as a starter, 96 and 96.3 against Baltimore and St. Louis. One thing we have seen, though, that worries me, and it's just this last game, 4 walks against 5 strikeouts against St. Louis. St. Louis is not necessarily one of the most disciplined teams. Maybe they swing a little bit less than other teams. What if we start to see more like that? More 5 strikeout, 4 walks performances in 5 or 6 innings.
That would be a concern, but I think when you pull back and look at the game log prior to that 4 walks, 1 against Detroit in 5 innings, 1 against the Orioles in 6, 1 against the Nats in 6 innings, 2 against the A's in 6 innings, 1, 1, 2, all the way back to May 7th against the Red Sox was the last time you walked 4. Yeah. And the thing that Lopez is doing really, really well during that span, that entire game log, I just went back through to May 7th, he's given up 2 home runs. They both came in the same start against the Nats. So even when he's walking a few guys, if he's not giving up homers, we can live with that.
But that is a huge source of noise in small samples.
Mm-hmm.
The bat says 4.24 ERA, 1.27 WHIP, and a 1.13 home run per 9 going forward, which is basically just in line with his career numbers. But it is funny to think of his career and be like, oh yeah, he's just going to be like his career numbers. Really? This guy has had very different years in his career.
And he's had massive home run problems in the past too. I mean, I realized 2019 there were more forces working against Ronaldo Lopez that season, but 35 homers in 184 innings is bad even in the context of what 2019 was. 25 and 188 2/3 the year before that. But it's those workloads that I'm like, you know what? He might just be fine. He's 30 years old. He knows what to do to get through a season as a starter. He made 65 starts in a span of 2 years between 18 and 19. And he's on a really good team in the National League. Maybe not an elite team at the level they were last year, but still a very good one that should be a little better at the plate in the second half, provide more run support, and will continue to probably get better via trade too. So like you still put the up arrow next to Atlanta as far as team context goes.
Yeah, I do have one thing at my disposal that's new. Disposable is updated stuff-based projections from Jordan Rosenblum.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to check what we got for Lopez because the projections on FanGraphs range from 3.39 ERA to 4.20. Reynaldo Lopez, 3.93 and a 25% strikeout rate. Funnily enough, there is nobody really in that range except for maybe ATC. So if you're looking at projections on FanGraphs, the stuff-based projections agree most with ATC. That's a really credible pitcher. And I think that the sort of the error variance might be towards being better than that.
That's where I'm at. That's why I'm playing it that way with Ronaldo Lopez. But it could be stepping on a new rake. As long as it's a new rake, we've approved it. It's okay to actually do that.
I mean, this is part of the reasons I would. With Lopez, I'm okay with this. With Crochet, I have a little bit of a problem with trying to buy Crochet.
Yeah, the extra outcomes on Crochet, I think it's added weight on a shutdown or an injury. I feel like Lopez has a better recent health track record. So you're not also worrying about that on top of different role and other things that can cause his value to just plummet.
At the very least, I mean, to say it very simply, Lopez has thrown 180 innings. I looked at Greg Crochet's line back all the way to college. The most he's ever thrown is 65. He's at 95.
Yeah.
So Crochet is just already in uncharted territory. And, for what it's worth, I know that they're watching Luis Gil and, they're going to figure things out, the way they can. But as Luis Gil goes into uncharted territory, for his innings, you are seeing a little bit more of a walk problem sprout up for him recently. It looks a little bit more like what we thought Luis Gil was as a prospect, and what we thought his flaws were in that the walk rate is kind of exploding recently. And that may have to do with fatigue. I know that in a single game basis, fatigue has a lot to do with losing your command. And then there's fatigue on a single game basis, and then there's fatigue that's sort of cumulative. And maybe Gil is hitting a little bit of cumulative fatigue. So in terms of buying high, I don't think I have Luis Gil on my list.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other pitchers, though, that are popping? We talked about a few just based on the win problems from earlier, right? Like that creates a few opportunities. But anybody else you're thinking that you're leaning into and saying, yeah, big number on the player rater, but I'm buying it.
Joe Ryan. It's only 5 wins. So if one thing that's common to like my conversations about Naylor and Jarren Duran is that I like to buy, if I'm buying high, I'd like to have at least one little thing I'm circling that could go better, So 5 wins for Joe Ryan on a good Twins squad. Like, why doesn't he have 8 or 9? Like I don't see a reason. There's great bullpen. It's decent offense. And then on top of that, Joe Ryan's velo is climbing, and he added a sinker. That's what I talked to him about most recently. And so that gives him 2 fastballs, a gyro slider, a sweeper, and a splitter. The closer he gets to being a full arsenal guy, along with his bread and butter, which is that fastball and splitter, the better I like him. And so I'm not necessarily saying he's going to have much better than a 3.3 ERA or a 0.96 whip going forward, but I think he could settle in around there and add more wins.
Yeah, I think that sinker tweak is a big one for Joe Ryan because the home runs have been a problem when he's had those bad stretches. And I think having that different look with the fastball, that different shape goes a long way towards possibly mitigating his biggest flaw.
Yeah, he goes so fastball up in the zone heavy, that even if he threw a high sinker, it would look different. Like if somebody was like, "Oh, fastball high in the zone, here we go," and they put their 4-seam swing on it, they could get sawed off or foul it off or whatever, free strike somehow.
Yeah, definitely. I like that Joe Ryan call. I thought he kind of stood out to me a little bit too when I was scrolling through the player rater. We're going to save the don't be like the Angels. I think we talked enough about the Angels on Tuesday, ragged on them enough as an organization. We'll kind of bump that back to Monday. Some ideas for when you should actually be all in on a team and when you should look to the future. That's the main idea that we're going to get to probably on our Monday episode. Let's get to some weekend waiver preview names because there's some interesting players out there this week. Jhonkensy Noel comes up, debuts with the Guardians, smashes a homer. And the video of his teammates at AAA reacting was pretty cool to see that going around on Twitter on Wednesday night. But I think Noel might be the kind of player that is a little underrated right now in prospect rankings because it didn't go great last year, even though there was power. He hit 220, got on base at a 303 clip. There are defensive limitations that are very likely to put him at first base, maybe in a corner outfield spot. But this is really a first base sort of profile. This year's been a lot better at AAA Columbus, right? He's already popped to 18 homers, got a 359 OBP. How do we put into the right how do we put into context when someone's dominating against this level of AAA pitching that isn't very good, but this is a player that was highly regarded before 2023 for his bat and his ability to be a middle of the order impact power guy. Is this actually a sneaky pickup hiding right out there? I mean, the homer in the debut doesn't help. That's going to draw extra attention, but I think there's a chance that he can just carve out a spot and be a regular for the Guardians. We've talked about them for years needing more power, and they've already taken a step forward this year as an organization. They're much better in that regard in the lineup already, but Noel might give them something they were hoping to get previously from Kyle Manzardo.
Yeah, what is going on? Like, why is he up? Naylor is hurt, right?
Well, I saw in the Discord, Naylor has been out of the lineup recently. I didn't see the reason given, if there's been an injury announced.
I thought I was listening to their cast and he was banged up somehow. He's dealing with something. David Fry seems like he would be a great first baseman. He is playing PHDHC.
Yep.
That's what he's been playing. That would allow, when everybody's healthy, for Naylor to be the first baseman. Naylor's played some outfield. Is there an opportunity in the outfield? We've got Will Brennan playing well enough to keep his job, probably. Tyler Freeman in the middle of losing his job. Daniel Schneemann is percolating. He has RF, CF, PHRF, CF, and 2B and CF. So Schneemann seems to be kind of going towards an outfield job. And then you got Kwan. Can Kwan play center?
Can Kwan play center? I mean,
he's
probably,
played 7 times in 2022. That was the last.
Yeah, they don't use him there, but the number of players I see playing center field on other teams that I didn't think could play center field, and knowing how good Kwan is in left.
Man, Tommy Pham out in center for Chicago.
Yeah, do you think Elliot Ramos was going to play center field?
I did not. I didn't. But I mean, they seem to have settled in. Kwan in left. So Schneemann and Freeman are battling for center. Brennan seems to be ensconced. Naylor's ensconced. Fry is maybe CDH. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a real opportunity here. I'm not sure there is. I'm going to say I'm not in.
You're not in.
I'm not in. The big improvement for him was to become more aggressive and hit the ball before he struck out. It wasn't that he improved his swing strike rate from 15.2 to 14.1. Neither of those numbers is good. And so he's become kind of ultra aggressive, and that is good for his power. It's good for getting there before he strikes out. I don't know if that's good for a debut. Like, I don't know if that's good for, like, pitchers might see him coming, right? Oh, here's this ultra aggressive guy trying to pull the ball for power, That seems like maybe it's going to be, you could pitch to him. So I'm not sure I see the long-term opportunity. And I think the adjustment will take a while for him.
Yeah, I think they can, because of the versatility of their roster, they can let him play for a few days, see if they like what's happening, and run with it if it works. I'm a little more optimistic about the ways they can do it, because the Guardians are one of those teams, and there's plenty of them around the league. They don't have that many high volume everyday guys. They push the mixing and matching and defensive versatility about as much as anybody right now. Because you look through and you're like, okay, Stephen Kwan, he's there every day. Jose Ramirez, yep, he's there every day. When healthy, Josh Naylor's pretty much there every day. You see him pretty much. Jimenez pretty much there every day. And then everybody else, even David Fry, who we like, plays
even Rocchio, right? Even their shortstop.
Even Rocchio doesn't play as much as you'd think. Rocchio plays a little more than you think because of his glove, I guess. He's had 3 days off in the last 2 weeks.
All right.
But I guess my point is, I think they can. Hitter. They've got enough guys that are in the bottom half of this lineup who don't play every day, who can play multiple spots, where if they really feel like they're getting a valuable contribution from someone they bring up, be that Noel, be that Manzardo a second time, or whoever it is, or Schneemann, they can play.
Freeman has options. Schneemann has options. They can even play around with the constitution of their major league roster.
Yeah, so I'm watching closely over the weekend. I've got some Thursday fab. I'll bid. I'll take the chance. It's not going to be super expensive. It could pay off, and if it doesn't, I'm not really that much worse off for it because it's kind of the meaty part of the roster that you're okay with. Like, you're not messing with that to go get them. You're messing with those fringe guys that are always up and down and on and off our rosters. What about Heston Kjerstad? Think things will be different for him this time around. He's played 2 of 3 since getting back up. It looks like maybe it's a big side platoon opportunity in left field with Austin Hayes. Like, does that change anything for you in leagues where Kjerstad's available?
He's really interesting because the prospect group probably disagreed with themselves on this one. You're talking about age at level. He's 25. So you want to, discount a lot of what he did. If you take a 24-year-old at AAA with a 116 WRC plus, as he was in 2023 with Kjerstad, you're actually not super excited about that. That's kind of like the right age at level with 16% better than league average. It's not that great. This year he comes back though, and even though he's old or oldish for the level, he had a 150 WRC plus and got to that power. People were like, "Is it real power? Is it not?" I was really impressed by my looks at him in the fall league. It is weird that he has struck out 30% of the time so far in the major leagues, but it is only 58 plate appearances, so I'm willing to say that's going to improve. Long-winded way of saying I don't know. I don't really know. Kyle Stowers is kind of interesting. They've cycled through him. Mayo with Norby, like Norby was up for a little bit. Now he's gone. It could happen or it couldn't. I will say though, I see the opportunity because I don't think that they want to play Hayes a lot. And if the opportunity is there, it just takes a hot streak. So I'd rather put money on Kjerstad than Noel.
I think I'm probably going Kjerstad over Noel where both are available because I think I'd trust the floor as a hitter more. But if I'm interested in Kjerstad, I'm definitely putting Noel on that same bid list. I think there's shallow league power with both of these players if it clicks in terms of playing time. So that's where I think they kind of belong in the same group. Looks like Luis Matos is back with the Giants, so you got to think about Matos perhaps in some deeper leagues. We got Joey Loperfido back in the pool again, so a lot of familiar names also kind of coming back around for their second run of fab, and that's just sort of how it goes. But the pitching side's a little better than usual this week.
Well, I do have one hitter to add to the list. Yeah. I just looked at one of my sorts in my 15 team leagues on NFC is just last 7 days ABs. Wish it was PA, but that's all right. And Ramon Laureano is third on one of my lists.
He's playing a lot right now.
He is playing a lot. The numbers aren't there, but I will say this: he has never played in a home park as friendly to power as the one he's in now in Atlanta. I don't know how much that means, but the BATX says he can hit 244, 316, 414. If you extrapolate out their projections to full playing time, it looks like almost like 10-10.
It's still deep leagues mostly for Laureano, but yeah, getting enough of an opportunity where I think short term could at least help you backfill if you're looking for some playing time in that last outfield spot.
That Atlanta improves over him at the deadline because they are a team that is aggressive at the deadline.
Yeah, he's got a month to really show something with this club. Maybe even a little less if he slumps hard enough. David Festa coming up for a debut on the pitching side. You've talked about him before as a prospect of the week selection, and everything looks really good in the underlying numbers. We had 35% K rate this year at AAA. The only real flaw has been an increase in homers. We haven't seen David Festa give up homers like he has this year with St. Paul, but He's coming up, I think, because Chris Paddock is down right now. So I will always make the argument that Chris Paddock just might not be that good. And if David Festa is good, perhaps he can actually stick around for a little while.
Yeah. And the Stuff Plus numbers say he is good. He had, what is this sorted by? I can't even figure this out. Oh, he's sorted by Stuff Plus. Okay. He had similar Stuff Plus to Nick Lodolo in AAA, and just short of Bobby Miller. And the fun thing was that he, there was a command blip for Festa at times in AAA last year. He had a 17% walk rate, maybe ABS related. This year, his location plus was positive. So if you look at all the pitchers that have above average stuff and locations in the minors this year, it's Paul Skeens, David Festa, Shane Boz, Wade Miley, Justin Verlander, Alec Marsh, Andrew Bash, Edward Cabrera, Slade Ciccone, and Tyler Alexander, and Brian Wu, and that's it. And Christian Scott and Will Warren. So it's a good group to be in. I mean, they're all major leaguers almost. Like most of the guys I've named are major leaguers or top prospects. So Festa belongs. He's coming up. He's got a legit 3-pitch mix, fastball, slider, changeup. It's a 4-seam fastball with good shape. It's a hard gyro slider. That combination is resistant to platoon splits. Both the 4-seam fastball and the gyro slider don't move in a way that makes him vulnerable to left-handers. And even if he is a little bit, he's got that changeup. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I think that Paddock might be out. There felt like he was fighting for his starting spot for a while, and I think he lost that fight.
Yeah, and you got Simeon Woods Richardson still pitching really well in the back of that rotation also, so maybe that's the ongoing competition for a spot as well. It's maybe 3 guys kind of pushing for those 2 spots in Minnesota. Paddock is down with right forearm fatigue, so it doesn't have like a structural concern, at least right now, but given his history of arm injuries especially, I think they might be a little more careful with Paddock trying to get him back from the IL. Hayden Birdsong came up for the Giants, and I just grabbed the screenshot of his pitch mix, and a 4-seamer, changeup, slider, curveball. I think all those secondaries actually graded out as above average pitches. The model didn't like the 4-seamer, but he throws it pretty hard. It's probably ride related. I was looking at the pitcher list player page. I think it had about 15 inches of ride. So that's probably the main issue. My question would be, scouting grades over at FanGraphs had like a 60 on that fastball and like a 30 on the changeup. The changeup looked great. The fastball, only by velo, looked great. Is this just a matter of maybe, I don't know, like how he was using it, and it looks good against lower level pitching? So, that's part of the calculus. Like, I'm wondering more about the changeup and the fastball, because I could imagine as a scout seeing that fastball and going, okay, this is a good fastball. He's locating it well, good life, okay. But the changeup graded out so well and didn't get a good scouting grade. Yeah,
the thing about ride, I'd be tempted to be like, oh yeah, they missed the fact that it doesn't have good ride. But most scouts that I know that are worth their salt have like established relationships with TrackMan people at parks, and
they could probably see it too. They're behind the plate.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they're better scouts than I am in terms of their eyes. They're behind the plate. They can see the hitters, how they react to it. And then lastly, there are a couple, minor league stat services that can give you some stuff like this. So maybe it's just a disagreement when it comes to what movement profiles work. I do believe that if I'm checking myself here, but I do believe it was kind of 2-plane-ish movement. Do you have the horizontal on it?
I'll have to see if I can grab that real quick.
I'm looking over here at Savant. I hate the fact that, of course, the Savant has different sort of naming characters, I like different numbers, like in terms of movement and stuff. But they have him as below average ride and above average horizontal, 9.6 inches of horizontal, I think, on the four-seam fastball. They have it as 3 inches above average. That's fairly significant. So maybe the scouts felt here's a two-plane, kind of a rider of a pitch, and the model just doesn't like it. I will say that I'm going to come down slightly on the more negative side. I watched most of that start. His command's not very good. His command's not very good. And the one thing he did do is he didn't get keyholed. So even if he was in like a 2-0 count, he would sometimes throw a breaking ball anyway, or rely on his velo or whatever it was. But I'm going to put him sort of in the streamer bucket.
Well, it works in that park, though. We'll see how it goes as far as the health of the other pitchers that could temporarily bump him back to the minors. But I kind of came away with a little more of an optimistic long-term view. If I'm playing in a keeper or dynasty situation, auto new, might be worth trying to get him cheap, stash him away, and just kind of see what happens over the second half of the season. There's a good starter kit here. 3 good secondaries. That's pretty solid, right? If you can improve the command or improve the fastball or add a cutter, there are some ways that Hayden Birdsong could be a really quality starter at some point down the road. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic for $1 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. Find Eno on Twitter at EnoSaris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. We're back with you at 1 o'clock Eastern on Friday on our YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening.